The thing about confidence is like everything else, you can't just go straight to it. It's not like you can wave a magic wand and confidence suddenly appears. It's because you want it to. First, you need to know that confidence is the goal for this particular situation. We need to know that maybe we're not feeling confident in that situation, and then being present with what is happening right now in my sort of emotional field. Going into a situation, I don't feel confident about it, and my goal is to be confident about it. Practicing confidence really means practicing presence and then patience. Patience is about sitting with the discomfort that we may experience if we are resisting what is happening in the moment. Resisting what is happening in the moment means, I'm going into a meeting, I need to be confident. I'm not confident about it, and therefore there's a sense of ouchness. I'm going to fall apart. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I'm not going to do well. I don't feel confident about this kind of phenomenon. We need to know that, even if it's just for a few moments, we need to be able to notice those sensations, because noticing them then gives us the opportunity to practice. Firstly, again, it's curiosity. Okay, so what's going on with me right now? What's the story that's running in my mind that is leading to me not being confident about this situation? Yeah, it might be that the story that's running in my mind is something like, well, I haven't done enough prep about this yet. I don't know enough about this topic to give a good account of myself in this meeting or whatever it is. And so there may be a reality of a situation that is arising that we don't feel confident, maybe because we just don't feel that we have enough information to do well. Okay, fine. So now we've got a situation to deal with. So then it's asking the question, okay, so if I don't have enough information to do well in this meeting, or I don't think I have enough information, how can I bring my best into that situation? So I'm walking into this meeting maybe and I'm a little bit unprepared. How can I bring my best into that situation? What do I need to mentally rehearse in terms of how I show up in that situation? And of course, then when we do that, we can bring back to mind all of the situations where we've done well in the past when perhaps we've been a bit off balance. We can bring back to mind, okay, so what were the qualities that I brought into that situation at that time that enabled me to show up at my best, even though maybe I wasn't that well prepared? What we need to bring back to mind is really, I sometimes call it vulnerability, openness. And you can even say, don't feel that well prepared for this, but this is what is coming up for me in the moment, that kind of language. Or if we don't want to say that we don't feel that well prepared, then just use a certain language, basically say, okay, this is what, as I think about this topic, this is what's coming up for me, and deliver something in a way that is graceful. I like to use the word gracefulness, which is the ability to say what is true and to continue to check in. If we don't feel that well prepared, then we can take control of the meeting by just asking the audience what they would like to know about and asking questions and checking in regularly along the way. We should be doing that whether we're well prepared or not, by the way, because showing up in that way gives us space, it gives us time, and it gives us a sense of knowing that we're showing up well in that moment, which then improves confidence in the moment. When we know that we're doing well, of course, in the moment, the way that we're handling things, then that tends to lead to doing well. When we know we're doing well, it leads to doing well. But doing well is a choice. It's not about what we know so much. It's about how we show up. It's about how we bring our best into that situation, which is about being steady. It's about being graceful. It's about pacing well. It's about using good voice intonation. It's about checking in regularly with your audience, asking questions like, okay, am I giving you, what you need? What questions might you have about what I've said so far? That kind of thing. Keeping the audience engaged, whether you're going into a meeting or you're delivering a presentation, or whether you're just having a conversation one-to-one with somebody, it's the same thing. Keep it steady, keep checking in, keep recontracting with your audience. Recontracting means, just checking in. Am I giving you what you need? Are there any questions coming up right now? Is there anything else that you would like to know about? And being totally able to be honest about what we know and what we don't, and what we might need to go and find out and then report back on. Very important. And knowing that we've got the languaging skills. Like, oh, well, such languages, if you think you've made a mistake. When people have made a mistake when they're delivering something, their confidence often evaporates and they go into kind of verbal vomit mode, which is where they just get very, very long-winded, but they're not hitting any points because they're anxious. It's very, very common. And we need to feel that in the moment and stop, and basically just back up and to use language like, Oh, the way that I often do it myself personally when I'm at my best is, which is not always, is just to say, oh, let me just back up here. I don't think that came out very well. And take a pause and think it through and then redeliver. And so many people, that's very simple. That's what I call, gracefully backing out of a mistake or where you feel that you haven't presented that well. Just say, well, you just stop. So let me back up a little bit here. I don't think that came out very well. And then just have another, reprocess it and then have another go at it. Because if you don't do that, and I've heard it many, many times, you just sort of trail off. And when you trail off, you're not doing well. And when you're not doing well, your confidence will evaporate. Once you start to tell yourself the story, I don't think I'm doing well here, then quite quickly it can start going wrong. You get, and I call it off balance. And when you're off balance, the traditional response most people have to feeling off balance is they start getting long-winded and they're not hitting their points succinctly, and they start talking faster. They stop leaving pauses. They stop using proper intonation, and everything then just kind of one sentence then merges into another, and the audience starts getting a little bit uncomfortable because they're getting overwhelmed. So confidence is about this. It's about knowing that you can handle stuff. It's about knowing that you can be at your best despite whatever happens. And being at your best is a choice we don't know that we can make. And it's about presence, knowing what's coming up, knowing what's happening in my emotional field and in my cognitive field, what thoughts are arising, what emotions are coming, and just being with them without reacting to them, which is, of course, patience. The patience to just sit with that which is arising just for a few moments while we remember, bring back to mind that which brings us to our best when situations like this are happening. And that's where we need skill. Of course, we need certain skill of what does it look like to bring our best to a situation like that. So we may need to learn some skills about how to deliver, how to use tentative language, maybe how to, communication skills. There are certain skills that we might need to learn, because when we have those skills, doesn't mean that we're going to use those skills, right? But having those skills is a precondition to being able to use the skills, you could say. Although it is not, it is not the case. Just because we have those skills, it means we're going to use those skills. And very, very often those skills go missing in action in the moment of choice, because we're caught up in the emotional, cognitive, worst case scenario flow of thinking. Oh my God, I'm screwing up here. They're going to hate me. It's going to damage my reputation. Everything's going to go horribly wrong. And I'm going to die alone and poor. Kind of storylines, right? Same old things we've said in the past. Confidence is a molecule that comprises presence, patience, curiosity. Okay, what's happening with me right now? And what is it that I need to remember in order to bring myself back online? Curiosity. And then, of course, we need to take the action. Another way that we sometimes describe this kind of thing is we call it the 4 components of mindfulness as we define them, where the first one is what we call actionable self-awareness. Actionable self-awareness is kind of knowing, well, what's happening with me right now. Oh, God, I'm feeling anxious. I don't feel confident. And being able to then say, look, my goal, I don't feel confident and I would like to be confident. We need to anchor that. That's actionable self-awareness, knowing what is happening with me right now in a way that I can intervene, I can do something. And then the second component of that, as you may remember, is self-remembering. And self-remembering, okay, so now I'm noticing that this is all happening with me. And I'm going, that's a little bit painful. Actionable self-awareness is the ability to observe that rather than being caught up in that. It's like slightly detaching from that, watching it. Oh, there it is. Because then we've got the space to be able to turn our attention to what we need to remember. Our attention right now is kind of loosely on this phenomenon, this anxiety, this flow of thinking. We detach from it, we unhook from it, and we watch it. But then as our awareness is unhooked from it, we can bring our awareness, we can turn it to something else. And that something else is that which I need to remember, that which is the language that we use is skillful for us. Patterns of thoughts that, bringing back to mind how we've been in the past when things have gone well for us. Skills that we have, mindsets, that can support us. And other things that we can remember, we call them resources that we can bring back to mind, that can bring us back online. And that's called self-remembering. And then, after that, you've got what we call self-redirection, which is the ability to redirect our attention to those things. We're able to redirect our attention to that which is skillful for us, which means that we're directing it away from that which is trying to hook us. So attentional redirection, or sometimes we call it self-redirection. It's basically attentional redirection, which is a precondition to what we call behavioral activation. Maybe that's not the same as what psychologists call behavioral activation or counselors, but our definition of behavioral activation is when we actually do what is necessary in line with what is skillful, because that's where the rubber kind of meets the road, where we take the action that is necessary. And it's the same for everything, including courage, including confidence. Most of us know what it takes to be confident. Lack of confidence is often due to us telling ourselves stories that are not true about what might happen to us if we screw something up in a particular way. First step is knowing that those worst case scenario stories that we're telling ourselves are probably not true. And then remembering that gives us the space, knowing that it's not going to kill us. Yeah, it might be uncomfortable if we make a mistake, but it's not going to kill us. And then with that, we have enough space. Our life is not being threatened here. So we don't have to take this immediate action based upon what our thoughts and emotions want us to do. Go into long-winded kind of dialogue or monologue, or speak too much, speak too quickly. This is what the mind believes is the coping strategy, the default coping strategy. This is what the mind believes it needs to do in order to get out of the trouble that it thinks we're in. Well, actually, we're not in any trouble. So we need to remember that. Just slow it all down. There's no lion chasing us out there. Bring our best self back online. We all know what our best self is like. And if we don't know, the precondition for cultivating confidence is to form an image in our mind of what our best self looks like. In fact, that's a very important component. We need to have a compass. We need to have an image in the mind of what our best self looks like in various different scenarios. We need to form that. And once we've formed that, then we just need to remember that in the moment of choice. Bring it back. Which is difficult to do when you're feeling under threat, but we're not under threat. That's a story. That vision of ourself can come from the way that we've been in the past under certain situations. But it could be that we have rehearsed a vision of how we would love to show up by observing the way that other people are showing up in a particular situation, and maybe forming the aspiration to show up more like them. Lack of confidence, and I think this is important, lack of confidence arises when we care too much about the wrong things. We're caring so much about the consequences of not showing up well in a particular situation, perhaps. And we're telling ourselves stories about those consequences, which are throwing us off balance. They're very threatening. And that begins to undermine our confidence. We're caring too much about it. What we need to care about is, instead of caring about what might go wrong, we need to care about how we would love to deliver ourselves into that situation. So we're caring about what we want rather than what we don't want. When we care too much about what we don't want, then it takes us off balance. It causes us to go into a threat state. When we care very much about how we show up, well, it's always a choice. We can always show up the way that we would love to show up. There is nothing stopping us apart from our own mind from showing up the way that we know we would love to. It's only in those moments when we forget that goal, when we forget that aspiration about how we would love to be able to show up, and we remember instead the consequence of not showing up like that, or the predicted consequence of not showing up that way, that's when things begin to go wrong. We can keep our eye on the prize, i.e., how we would love to show up, keep our mind's eye on that. And just like a motorcyclist, riding a motorcycle, the motorcycle will go in the direction that we're looking. If we look at the pothole, we're going to go into the pothole. It's called target fixation. If we keep our eye on the prize, and all of the resources that are associated with that prize, all the skills, all the knowledge, all the mindsets, and keep our eye on all of those things, then that is the direction in which we will move. And courage won't even be a factor. It will just be how we are. Confidence will arise, not through courage, but because that is just our, it'll become the default state of being. We are confident. We know that we can handle things. Whatever comes up, we're able to meet it. If it's difficult and bad and troublesome, we can meet it. We know we can. But we need to have that compass. We need to know what that looks like. And where do we get that from? Well, it can be from our own past history. We tend to focus on things that we've done wrong rather than things that we've done right. We can draw out the knowledge of how we've got over difficulties before and when things have gone well for us. If we can remember, sometimes the phrase I often use is, can we bring back to mind situations where the story that drives the behavior that we don't like, and there's a story that is driving that behavior that we would like to change? Is there ever been a time where that story is surprisingly absent? Because that story is surprisingly absent, then we're sort of liberated to show up in the way that we would like to show up. Most of us have got those situations where we have, despite difficulty, we've shown up well, and we would just love to be able to do that again and again and again. What were we caring about at that moment when we showed up well? What was it that we were caring most about instead of caring about what we don't want? What might go wrong? Confidence is something that can arise when the core qualities are present. Presence, patience, curiosity, acceptance, letting be, kindness, maybe compassion. When all of these core qualities are present, confidence is more likely to be the default state of being rather than something we have to work on. But for many of us, confidence is something we have to work on, but we work on it through working on the atomic qualities. The context is that we say to ourselves, maybe we'd like to have confidence as a value. We'd like to strengthen confidence as a value. And so in order to strengthen confidence as a value, then we need to know what it looks like. We need to have a kind of clear view on what are the various contexts in which we would like confidence to arise. And those contexts tend to be either emotional, relational, or situational, or temporal. So emotional is, I would like to bring confidence to situations where I'm feeling anxious. And relational, I would like to bring confidence for times when I'm feeling anxious, when I'm delivering a presentation to a group of board members. It's relational or and also situational when I'm in a board meeting. And temporal is an interesting one because we need to set the goal in a way that where we kind of install the idea that building confidence is not just an event, it's a process over time. So temporal can be something like, I would like to build confidence when I'm feeling anxious, when I'm delivering a presentation to board members, right? So we've got relational, emotional, and situational by the end of July 2025, or whatever it might be. We would set ourselves a time frame by which we would like to have that quality, which installs the idea that it is a process and that we shouldn't be beating ourselves up because it's not happening right now. Because when we start beating ourselves up, that sets off the emotions of guilt and shame, and emotions of guilt and shame prevent learning because it feels so uncomfortable that we try to avoid them. And in trying to avoid them, we then avoid practicing with things that might take us off balance. We avoid practicing with our values. We worry that we're going to fail and we're going to have that emotion of guilt and shame coming up. Oh, I did it again. That was terrible. Look at me. I can never change. That just doesn't feel good. And it creates avoidance behavior. So keeping the prize in mind is the way forward. And instead of saying, oh, I broke down again, look at what happened to me, instead of saying that to ourselves, we say, oh, no, okay, so that happened. Ouch, that was uncomfortable. Didn't like that. Okay, so what did I learn from this? And what might I do next time that is different from what I did this time? So we bring our attention again to the prize, which makes us feel better, because instead of orienting to beating ourselves up, we're orienting towards, okay, what am I learning from this? Which makes you feel better and it lifts your eyes up. Confidence is a difficult one, but people need to recognize that it is a process. And only by recognizing that it is a process rather than an event can it really be worked on? We care too much about what other people think. But we need to ask ourselves why. We need to do that downward ladder. What's the worst thing about somebody not thinking well of me? Is it going to kill me? And we need to kind of analyze it in the way that, if you're going to go into detail, you would basically say, okay, so I'm caring too much about what other people think and it's taking me off balance. Okay. So then we need to ask ourselves the question. So what's the worst thing about caring less about what people think? We need to ask that question. What's the worst thing that could happen to us if we cared less about what people think? And then on the other hand, we need to ask ourselves the question, what's the best thing that could happen if we cared less about what people think? Right. So we bring that in, we ask ourselves that question. We say, so we anchor that, oh, that's going to feel, in fact, it's probably the first question to ask. What's the best thing that could happen if I could be confident through caring a bit less about what people think? But of course, as a step before that, we need to know that it is caring. We need to sort of diagnose that it's the story that we're telling ourselves about the consequence of people thinking badly of us for a moment. The consequence of that is driving the feeling of lack of confidence. It's driving our lack of confidence. It's the estimation or the prediction of the consequence of somebody not thinking well of us, even if it's just for a moment, right? We don't realize, right? We tell ourselves a story. Oh my God, look at the way this person's looking at me. They don't like me. They think I'm doing a bad job. They think I'm useless or whatever. And we can't tolerate that for not even one moment. And so we avoid that. And in trying to avoid that, we screw it up. We care about it too much. And of course, it means that we're going off balance. All of those things that I spoke about earlier on tend to happen. If we're feeling that way, we over-index how somebody is thinking about us, and it causes us to present in a way that is completely off balance. But if we can basically say, look, okay, so yeah, it's uncomfortable if this person doesn't feel badly with me, but okay, so I'm having this feeling. So what's really involved in resolving that? In other words, if I want having others thinking well of me as an outcome, you ask yourself, okay, if this is the outcome that I would like to have, knowing that I can't control it, I then say, well, I know that if that's the outcome I want, then over time that can happen if I show up well again and again and again. And then it's more likely to happen. We can't control it in the moment, but we can control it by our consistent behavior over time. We can influence it, not necessarily control it. We can set the conditions for people feeling better about us in the longer run through the way that we show up. So then it's the question then is, okay, if I would like people to feel better about me over time, then what are all of the ways in which I need to show up consistently over time so that that outcome might happen? And we list them out and we rehearse them. We ask ourselves what values, what it is that we need to care about, what values do we need to install in order that that might happen? And courage might well be one of those. When it comes to confidence, courage, the value of courage may be one of those, although confidence itself is a value. Then we set the goal to strengthen that value, the value of confidence. And if you remember, when you look at the values worksheet, the first question on the values worksheet is, what does it look like? What is confidence like for you? And then what are the behaviors that correlate with confidence for you? What behaviors would you like to be able to express in what contexts? Situational, relational, emotional, temporal. What are the behaviors that you would like to be able to express that correlate with what you believe is confidence? And what resources, in order to express those behaviors, what resources do you need to access in the moment of choice? Mindset, skills, knowledge, experience, relational. But in other words, what is it you need to remember that you have access to in that moment? Is what do we need to be competent with? So, of course, if you're delivering a technical presentation and you haven't got the skill, then you're not going to do well. It doesn't matter how confident you are. Maybe really confident, doesn't mean you do well. So there's a basic modicum of competence that's required, and you've got to make that happen. Otherwise, you're faking it. But the competence that we really need is mental competence. Because having technical competence doesn't automatically bring you them. I mean, I know people that are just fantastically technically competent who cannot speak, let's say, speak in front of a group, or fall apart whenever they're talking to somebody that they regard as important to them. And they forget everything that they know, because everything that they know is replaced in their mind by their anxiety, by their continuous rumination, in the moment rumination. And of course, if you've got that going on in your mind in the moment, then you're not going to have in the mind in the moment the skills, the knowledge, and experience that you need to bring to bear in order to show up well. And every time you show up badly, it's going to undermine your confidence. And it's going to cause you to tell yourself the story again. Oh, look at me. I'm never going to be able to resolve this. I'm just useless. You think about gravitas, for example, right? So gravitas is partly about this thing called heft. So heft is knowing your shit. It's basically what it is. If you don't know your shit, then you're not giving yourself a good starting point. So, but knowing your shit is not, it's a precondition, but it doesn't lead directly to delivering yourself well into a situation. But it is a necessary precondition. But we don't talk about that so much. You know, it has to be the assumption that you know your stuff. What we're talking about really is the mental aspect of confidence, which is another form of mental competence, what we really are focused on. And when we know that we are mentally competent, then we flourish. Our definition of flourishing is knowing that you can bring your best into situations. It's the feeling that arises when you know that you can be at your best. What goes on out there is nothing that you can control. The only thing that you can control is how you bring yourself into it. It's always, and that is always totally under our control. The world could be falling apart around you, and you still can control how you show up, knowing that you've done your best. Yeah, the world, you know, went to hell in a handbasket, but I did my best. That is what causes us to know. You know, if the world goes to hell in a handbasket and you don't believe that you did your best, that's terrible. It's your best. It's a tremendous mitigation. Doesn't mean you got what you want. It just means that you did your best. So for us, calmness is a function of presence and patience. The presence plus patience really equals calm. The expression we sometimes like to use is having a mind which is calm, clear, and effective. So what that really means is a mind that is unencumbered by being hooked into reactive patterns of thinking and feeling. As soon as we go, oh, look at that, we unhook from it and we watch it. That, by definition, means that we have a mind which is calm, clear, and effective. We're watching the phenomena that are arising in the mind, but they are not who we are. They're just phenomena that are coming and going in the mind. It's always a precondition to every training of any value that we would like to cultivate. The precondition is having a mind which is unhooked from what is happening, from its content, a mind which is unhooked from its content, and instead being able to observe its content. I think it's a very important point, which is why mindfulness type practices are so important today. Because today, the way the world shows up today encourages us to just get hooked into content and become the content, fused with it. And we've got to spend more time watching the content that comes and goes in the mind and asking ourselves the question, oh, how does this align with who I would love to be? This content. You know, how do I need to adjust my orientation towards this content? How do I need to adjust the predictions that I'm making about this content in order that I can show up in line with my aspirations for myself in this particular situation? If I haven't developed the aspiration, then I don't have that compass to be able to direct to. Okay, I'm watching this. That's interesting. Thank you. This is where I want to look. Well, we need to know, because there's an unlimited amount of content that is available to the mind. If right, we need to decide how to make the choice of what it is that we're going to look at for the moment as a compass, as a guide to our behavior. So everything is always about authenticity. And it's a beautiful aspiration to be authentic. But we need to know what it is that we're being authentic to. There's a huge amount of misunderstanding about the word authenticity. Because most people believe that being authentic means that they must be transparent about every emotion, every weather system that's kind of passing through the mind. needs to be on the sleeve and disclosed. Believe it or not, that's a very superficial view of authenticity. Just to wear your heart on your sleeve means that you're being authentic to your emotions, which sometimes can arise based upon fake news, predictions that you're making about the world that are not true. And these emotions arise often as a result of forgetting who we really are underneath the emotion. When the emotion is present, it pushes out our true sense of self. The emotions cause what some people would describe this as a false sense of self. The emotional self is driven by all kinds of normally untrue predictions that have been installed within us about what are the consequences of the things that are coming in. What does it mean to us, this data that is coming into our senses? We try to make meaning from it by telling ourselves stories about it, which are learned from our previous experience. Those stories are neither true nor untrue. They're just memories of our previous experience that are being reconstructed in the moment to intersect with the data that is coming into our senses. Do you want to be authentic to that? Or do you want to feel it as it comes up and go, oh, here it is again. Oh, that's interesting. And then bring back our true self, which is underneath that, the more stable sense of self. That for many of us, which is often aspirational, this aspirational self, which is there. It's there. It just we need to drill through the emotion in order to access it. So authenticity is a difficult one because the way that most people, I like to be authentic. Well, great, knock yourself out. If you really want to be authentic to just this emotional layer, then you're going to go around the same, I call it the circle of pain again and again and again, probably. Being authentic to those emotions is perfectly okay until it's not. Until you realize that doing that is what's preventing you from growing to be the person that you are. I'd like to say that you are. I mean, obviously, it's the person you aspire to be, but actually, it's already there, but it's underneath this kind of cognitive emotional layer. You need to drill through it to get there. We just need to remember who we are when the emotion is running, and it's going to cause us to do or say something that may require cleanup. And in that moment, we need to remember who we really are. Even from a behavioral perspective, it needs to be atomic. Rather than say, well, we need to show up like this when this happens. Well, we need to be very, very atomic about that. So this is the specific kind of language that I would love to be able to use when this happens. This is what I would like to say. This is how I would like to be sitting. This is what I would like to be on my face. Maybe I need to bring a smile up. Quite often when we're not feeling confident, when things are going wrong, the anxiety shows up on the face. And there might be part of that behavioral molecule is I need to soften my face. At the moment that I'm feeling not confident and I'm starting to screw it up, I need to soften my body, put a smile on my face, a proper one, soften the frown, relax the body, feel my feet on the ground. And just doing that, the changing our physiology helps us to bring a better version of ourselves into that situation. There's a big relationship between the physiology and the behavior. So often the first step is noticing the body, relaxing the body, putting a smile on the face, softening everything up. And what that does is that activates the parasympathetic nervous system and makes it more likely that the threatening stories are going to fall into the background so that we can bring forward the supportive narrative instead of those threatening narrative. We need that level of clarity, specifically what it is. Now, I want to show up like this because that's what confidence looks like. Well, we need to atomize that, what this is. Because I want to show up like this. Okay. So what is this that we're talking about here? What does it mean for my body, my facial expressions, for the language that I'm using, for the way that I'm using that language, the tonality, the intonation, the pacing. How do I sit? How do I carry myself? We need all of that mapped out. We need a very, very clear vision of what confidence looks like. All of the components mapped out. Of course, you can imagine if you could only remember all of that in the moment of choice, it would be great, wouldn't it? You'd be able to do it. And you'd be able to say, well, to hell with those stories that are preventing me from doing those things. I've already rehearsed that those stories are not true. I already know that. So I'm going to let them go right now so that I can be that person that I would love to be right now. The cultivation of the core mental qualities, sort of underpins sort of everything. But you still need to practice them context by context. Just practicing all these core mental qualities won't automatically get you courage, confidence, resilient. You have to be content. It's going to be very, very similar, but you do need to apply those things to the various different values that you would like to cultivate. Depending upon the value that you're trying to cultivate, you can see the concept. It's patience. Okay, so patience. So patient with what? If courage is the thing, if confidence is the thing, patience with what? Curiosity. So if confidence is the thing, curiosity about what?